Welcome back to Steel City Sports. So today I'm going to be talking about my top 5 MVP candidates just based off of week 3. I don't plan on doing like an MVP ladder week by week. I think I'm going to do this every couple of weeks and just kind of update it, see how things are changing over the season. So expect these type of videos maybe every 2 or 3 weeks, but we're going to be looking at the MVP race just based off of week 3. Obviously, a lot can change. So maybe we'll look back in this in a couple weeks and we'll be like, how the fuck were these guys on the list? Well, keep in mind, this is solely based off the first 3 weeks of the NFL season. With all that being said, let's get into the list. Right, so I went with a bit of a cop-out here at 5, putting 3 people tied at 5. Obviously, as the year goes on, these type of players are going to be weeded out. The MVP race is going to get a lot more narrow. But since we are such early on in the season, I feel like there is a lot of contenders, and I did want to mention these guys. I didn't want to pick any one of these 3 guys because I don't believe ultimately either of these 3 players are going to end up being realistic MVP candidates, but they do deserve some attention. They do deserve some buzz just based off how they've played in the first 3 weeks. Taking a look first at Derek Carr, running that Shanahan-style offense under Clint Kubiak. Obviously, their offense looked incredible in weeks 1 and 2 playing against the Panthers and the Cowboys. However, they came back down to earth against the Eagles, and that's why I was kind of saying pump the brakes on the Saints. Like, at the end of the day, I know they looked really good, but the Panthers, they have a terrible defense. The Cowboys, they clearly have a terrible defense as well. I don't even think the Eagles' defense is that good, yet they held that offense to just 12 points. So we got to see as time goes on. Maybe the Saints are going to come back down to earth. I don't buy Derek Carr as a realistic long-term MVP candidate for this season, but I did want to show him some respect for how good he looked in those first 2 weeks. That's why he's tied at 5th here. Another guy tied is Baker Mayfield. Had an incredible week 1. He was the best statistical quarterback from week 1, putting up 4 touchdowns on the Washington Commanders. Played a pretty good game in week 2 against the Lions where they won that game, but then he went on to have a complete and utter meltdown against the Denver Broncos. Had he not done that, if he would have just had like even a mediocre game, Baker probably would have been solidified by his own at 5. But the fact that he had that meltdown against a terrible Broncos team, for me, is what knocked him out of holding the 5 spot just by himself. And then the last guy I have is Geno Smith. Don't buy him long-term. I don't trust Geno long-term, but you got to give him a lot of credit. He's been extremely productive to start off this season, having Seattle being one of 5 teams left undefeated. And he's been a big reason for that because he's played incredibly well, very productive in the passing game. But like I said, I don't buy him long-term. He's thrown the same amount of interceptions as he's thrown touchdowns this year. So we'll see long-term with these guys, but let's get into number 4. At number 4, I have Patrick Mahomes. Now, I don't feel like Mahomes has been lighting it up statistically. We're going to take a look at his numbers here in a second. The reason why Mahomes makes the MVP ladder is for the simple fact that he is Patrick Mahomes. He's the best player on the planet. And even though he might be struggling statistically now, the Chiefs are still going to win a shit ton of games. So I might not like it. You guys might not like it, but Mahomes is going to be in the conversation just because he's Mahomes, just because the Chiefs are probably going to rattle off another 12 or 13 wins this year. So what I did for these guys, I have their numbers. We're going to read them off through 3 weeks, but then I also averaged them out over 17 games. So you can kind of get a grasp to see how their numbers would look if they continue this rate of play. So Mahomes has thrown 659 passing yards. His touchdown to interception ratio, I think, is really an atrocity. That's the biggest reason why Mahomes is not higher on this list, because a 5-4 touchdown interception ratio is just something we are not accustomed to seeing Mahomes do. He has not been taking care of the football. He's had a couple really reckless throws. So to see that from Mahomes is kind of shocking. And just 49 rushing yards, not really a big rusher, but we know in spots Mahomes can be really clutch with his decision-making, deciding to extend plays out of the pocket. But the biggest thing for Mahomes going right now is the Chiefs are 3-0, and he's going to get a lot of the credit for that. So like I said, I averaged out his stats for a 17-game sample size. These numbers would look like 3,734 passing yards. That'd be pretty low for a Mahomes season, of course. His touchdown interception ratio would be 28-23. That would be terrible for Mahomes. That would be the most picks he's ever thrown in a season. I don't think that's going to keep up. And it'd also be 277 rushing yards. So when we look at those numbers, if he continues to play that way, he will not be in the MVP race. I think he's going to get it back on track. And for the fact that I think the Chiefs even though they have some concerns with injuries, with Pacheco out, Travis Kelce not playing that well, it's still the Chiefs. You can't doubt them. They're still going to win a shit ton of games, probably be the 1 seed again, so you have to keep them in the conversation. Number 3, I have C.J. Stroud, and I think he has a similar advantage to Mahomes in that his team is going to win a ton of games. They're another team that could easily threaten to be the 1 seed this year. Even though they haven't, crushed people, they've been able to find different ways to win the game, even with Joe Mixon getting injured. So C.J. Stroud has had a very productive year thus far. 709 passing yards, a 4-2 touchdown interception ratio, just 24 rushing yards. We know CJ doesn't really like to get out of the pocket as much. Does have the Texans at 2-1 right now. So over a 17-game sample size, his numbers would look like 4,018 passing yards, which is actually the highest of all the guys we're going to talk about today. His touchdown to interception ratio would be 23-11, so that looks far better than Mahomes' ratio right now. And he'd have 136 rushing yards. So, like I said, I think they're going to win a lot of games. He's going to continue to be very productive. I don't think he's going to throw as many interceptions as 11 like we have here in the projections, because he only threw 5 last year as a rookie, and we know the weapons he has around him. It's a very high-powered offense. I would expect C.J. Stroud to be a guy who's going to climb up this list as the year goes on. Next up, I cannot believe that I'm about to speak these words, but based off the first 3 weeks, Sam Darnold is the runner-up for MVP. I mean, wow. If you would have told me that, I would have fucking laughed in your face, because I had no hope for Sam Darnold. Even though he had a lot of talent around him in Minnesota, I just thought he always had that fatal flaw of trying to play hero ball, making reckless plays. It looks like, at least through 3 weeks, Kevin O'Connell has really been able to fix that. And maybe that's something Sam Darnold was just always missing. He never had a good play caller with him. Now he has one of the best in the league with Kevin O'Connell. And after 2 really impressive wins, beating 2 teams I still consider to be Super Bowl teams, with the 49ers in week 2, they beat them, and then this past week, they just curb stomped the Houston Texans. So the Vikings look legit. That's another thing you can pair with Sam Darnold. It's, I think, probably the biggest thing. You know, he has great stats. We're going to look at that. But having the Vikings at 3-0, I think they have a really realistic shot to win this division, which I don't think anyone, myself included, thought was a realistic possibility going into this year with some of the powerhouses you have in this division with Green Bay and Detroit. Let's take a look at his numbers, though. 657 passing yards and a really impressive 8-2 touchdown interception ratio. I thought even if he would be productive in this offense, he would be turning the ball over a lot more than that. He also has 35 rushing yards with no rushing touchdowns. Looking at his numbers over a 17-game sample size, that would be 3,723 passing yards. This is the best part. 45-11 touchdown interception ratio. That is fucking crazy for Sam Darnold. 45 touchdowns. If Sam Darnold throws that many touchdowns, I think he would win MVP. So it's all on him. Can he keep this up? I mean, I think he can, because when you look at the two out of the 3 teams he beat, like I said, they are really good teams. It's not like he's beating up on Jacksonville or Tennessee. He's beating up on legit teams that were really, really good last year and should still be really, really good this year. So as fucked up as it is to say, right now Sam Darnold is the runner-up for MVP. And the guy that I have clearly in the driver's seat for the MVP race this year, just through 3 weeks, is Josh Allen. He's been the best individual player in the NFL through these 3 weeks from a statistical standpoint, from an eye test standpoint, and he's even got a narrative storyline going for him in the fact that he lost his number 1 weapon in Stephon Diggs, and it's kind of this ragtag collection of receivers. It kind of reminds me of 2015 Cam Newton, who really didn't have a lot to work with in terms of offensive weapons. He had Greg Olsen. That was kind of it. He had a bunch of AI-generated receivers. That's kind of what Josh Allen's dealing with now. Now, obviously, I think this group is a lot more talented. I like Khalil Shakir a lot. Keon Coleman has a lot of upside. But these are not household names. These are not proven commodities as number 1 guys or guys you can put a lot of trust in. So he's got kind of a lackluster core of weapons, yet he's still putting up ridiculous numbers. And what was the biggest area of criticism for Josh Allen, last year and years prior? It was the turnovers. He hasn't thrown a single interception through the first 3 weeks. Let's take a look at it. 634 passing yards, a 7-0 touchdown interception ratio. He has 85 rushing yards, 2 rushing touchdowns. The biggest part, another big part of his case would be the Bills are undefeated right now, 3-0. They just killed the Jags. They killed the Dolphins, and they beat up on the Cardinals week 1 as well. Let's take a look at his numbers adjusted for 17 games. 3,593 passing yards, but this is the kicker. 39 touchdowns to 0 interceptions. That's not going to happen, but just when you factor that out, he's playing the most efficient football of his career, and not turning the ball over, taking care of the football. He'd also have 482 rush yards for 11 more rushing touchdowns. So he legitimately has put on his Superman cape. I think this is the year Josh Allen is going to win MVP. I expect to see him at the top of this list throughout the season, just based off how he's playing right now. And I will be putting money on Josh Allen to win MVP this year. But that has been my MVP ladder for week 3. Stay tuned, and definitely let me know down in the comments some of the people maybe I left out that you think should be in the top 5. If you made it this far, appreciate you listening. Please like and subscribe.